What's going on, everyone? You're tuned in to Create Force, where we create and dominate. That's Kai Billings. I'm Mike Sarge. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest with us today. She's a trailblazer, an active duty member, an author, a speaker who has inspired many with her courage and leadership. She's appeared on networks like ABC and NBC Nightly News, and her writing has been featured in the Washington Post, Military Times, Ink Stick, and LGBTQ Nation. Please join us in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram to Create Force. Ma'am, how are you?
I am doing great, and it's Colonel now, so which is
Oh,
kind of cool and kind of weird and a little different. I'm getting mentoring lessons now from general officers on colonelling, and that's kind of fun to learn how to be a colonel, and to get that opportunity to talk with folks like you is a ton of fun. And thank you for paying me what I often say is one of the highest compliments you can pay to someone else, which is calling someone a trailblazer, because it's not about them in that term. It's about the space they've created for the people that follow behind. And that's what I think is really amazing, because what trailblazers do is we go out and knock down barriers so that by the time we reach the end of our journey, the people following behind don't have to overcome the same obstacles that we did, and they still have the energy to go further. So that's really amazing. That is what I strive to be. So thank you for that. And it's a pleasure to join you.
absolutely. Absolutely. No, thank you so much for joining us. And it's a pleasure. For anyone watching who may not know who you are, can you just share a little bit about yourself and what got you on this journey?
Well, in a way, it was all almost accidental, or something I never thought I would be able to be in my journey in the service, because I am now one of the senior transgender officers within the military. But when I came in to serve, you could not be out and be trans. This was long before Don't Ask, Don't Tell had been repealed. So everyone had to hide their identity. And even when Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended and lesbians, gays, and bisexuals could serve openly in 2011, we thought it was going to be another 10 or 20 years until trans people could serve openly. So when that happened in 2016 and I was able to come out, it started me on an incredible journey, both of leadership development and in seeing how we can create a better future for all of us. And it kind of went into hyperdrive less than a year later when President Trump tweeted that transgender people should be banned from the service. And all of a sudden, it was literally fighting for our existence and our ability to serve. Even with a year of open service at that point, and trans people serving here at home and all around the world doing their jobs and doing it well, all of a sudden it's like, where did this come from? What do we do? Is a tweet in order? And that kind of media spotlight that then came on us, and showed who trans people were, was really important in kind of advancing the narrative and helping people understand that, yeah, we're here, we're serving, we're doing this for all the right reasons, and we should have a future in the service. But that future is still uncertain. So there's a lot going on with that in representing a community, making sure that we still have a place, and then really doing a lot of education to understand just who trans people are and to shatter stereotypes, which I've got a great story about if you'd like to go into, some of the stereotypes that are out there about who trans people are.
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, like you led perfectly into like the next point. Honestly, because when you talked about the education piece, I actually wanted to ask you, what are some of the most common misconceptions about transgender service members that you've either experienced or that you've just heard from others?
Well, they can be really outlandish. Those stereotypes that people have of trans people in general are pretty wild, and in many cases, we're viewed as tricksters. We're trying to pull one over on someone, or we have mental health conditions that we're portrayed as the monsters in a lot of popular entertainment. It was that way for decades. It wasn't until very recently that you started seeing trans people in culture as anything other than the psycho killer or someone trying to play a trick on a person. So The stereotypes for transgender people in the military can be even further out there. That for a trans woman like myself, that there would be no possible way we could return fire from our foxhole because we're too busy thinking about our gender identity or what we're going to wear that night. Or that a transgender man is a raging steroidal monster that's going to get everyone in their unit killed because they're going to charge and try and take that hill at the wrong moment against orders, when nothing could be further from the truth. But the stereotypes are out there really that we're just the boogeyman, we're different. And in some cases, it's just a pure ignorance as to who we are, that we're even capable of serving. So as I mentioned, that I had a story where I have a boss that I worked for about 6 months. And at the end of that time, he retired. But before he left, he called me into his office and said, "You broke my stereotype of who a trans person is just by showing up to work every day." And I'm like, whoa, that is a really low bar. But one that I will happily step over, because if that's the perception out there, that we are in some way incapable of the simplest things, I mean, we are not only crushing that stereotype, but so many others. The trans people out there that are winning awards, getting promoted, doing their jobs every day, they have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to break those stereotypes just by showing up.
What I also wanted to ask is, because it's obvious that you're passionate about this, and it makes a lot of sense on why people love hearing you speak. But you're an author as well, and you actually recently released the book. And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about the book and what messages do you hope to convey through your writing and through your public speaking engagements.
Yeah, talking about the book, which is Forging Queer Leaders.
There you go.
It just released yesterday, so I'm really excited about getting this out into the world, because I think there truly is something unique about the way that LGBTQ leaders tend to develop. And there are a lot of similarities in the way that just about any minority leader develops through the stigmatization, marginalization that we all face through just existing in the world. But where I think LGBTQ folks differ is that there is this moment of coming out. There, for some of us, that moment of transition. And what do those crucible moments, as well as living in the closet, which a lot of other people that endure minority stigmatization don't have the option to do because it's visibly who they are. And in many cases for LGBTQ folks, you could walk by and no one knows. So that effort of coming out to yourself, coming out to the world, and perhaps transition for trans people, I think actually builds a lot of interesting skill sets. The closeted piece is another really interesting one, because it's like having a superpower, but that has a negative and a positive aspect. And I'll give one example. When you are protecting your identity, you are speaking about who you went out with that weekend, and you have to spend the time to change pronouns when you're talking about them if you don't want to out yourself as a gay person, or where you were if you were at a queer club or a trans organization and you can't say that. You're doing a ton of work not only to protect your identity, to put those shields up in front of you, but you're also learning to scan the room and understand the environment you're operating in, and learn, is it safe if I were to come out or talk to people in this type of environment? And it's almost like getting a master's degree in risk management, trying to understand the environment around you. So those skills that you build, while they can be energy intensive and draining, and that can be a real negative aspect, also from a leadership standpoint can be a real positive skill, because it lets you notice things that others might miss. It lets you understand what your audience is looking for and how you build those bridges to connect. So there are tons of examples in LGBTQ leadership of these skills you build through experiences that might be really negative, particularly in the moment. But as you reflect on them, as you look at what you did to prepare for and to come out of those crucible moments, they make you really an outward focused leader. Not only one who's there to build bridges and develop teams, but tends to think about others. How am I doing this, as we talked about, to be a trailblazer, to be a leader so that others can follow and not face the same barriers, instead of, I want to use these skills to get myself ahead. And that's a very different mindset that I think the queer community tends to build in numbers that you wouldn't expect in the general population.
No, that's great. That's awesome. Kai, did you have anything that you wanted to ask?
No, absolutely. So, Bree, you highlighted how some of these skills that you're learning can be very draining. And I feel like that paired with the mental tax of just the uncertainty for trans service members has to be a lot. So, how do you reset and stay centered through all of the craziness that is going on?
That's a tough challenge for anyone living through stressful times. What is it that recharges your batteries? And I think we all have to take the advice we get anytime we jump on a plane and we're told, put your own oxygen mask on first. Because for all of those who care about other people, for all of those who do any sort of advocacy work, we know it's burnout work. And not only do we have to be willing to take the time to take care of ourselves, we need to invest in ourselves as well. And so for me, I have a couple things I love to do to recharge my batteries. That means going to the mountains, whether that's in the winter, skiing down them, or in the summer, hiking up them. It is standing or sitting on top of one of those peaks and just taking in the view from, 13, 14,000 feet and looking around. And that to me recharges my batteries. But there are other things. There are the little victories along the way. Like when I get a call from someone's commander or their first sergeant saying, hey, I have a trans airman or a trans guardian, and I want to know how to take care of them. I'm like, thank you. That is so incredible. And to be able to help a little bit in those journeys is amazing.
Something interesting you said earlier, which was about essentially like the transition piece for someone that's transgender. A part of that journey is changing your name. And I always ask this when I talk to people, how did you come up with your name? Like what was the thought process behind that? Because I always ask this, and it's always a different story, and I love hearing it. But I would love to hear how you chose your name.
Honestly, what happened is my wife and I were sitting around the kitchen table and we were talking about at this point, the fact that I needed to start venturing out into the world as myself. And this was a long time ago. And we're like, well, what do we call you? And we just started throwing out names. And eventually we got to one like, I don't hate that. That sounds appropriate. And it had the same first two letters as what is now my middle name, used to be my first name. So, I might recognize it a little quicker if I hear that sound first, but it fit. And I thought it was really interesting when I did finally formally change my name. As I said, I kept my old first name and now Brian is my middle name because I was named after one of my father's friends who passed away when they were really young. And I just felt like, look, I'm claiming my identity, but it was also important to honor that piece of it and all the connections, because it's interesting reading the history of how trans people have been treated in this country, particularly by the medical community and the psychological community. It used to be the criteria for anyone to transition was you had to completely throw away your old life, like quit your job, leave your family, start in another city. It was kind of like the standard, but that's not right. I mean, all of our experiences, all those developmental moments stick with us. And I wanted to be able to honor that. I didn't throw away who I was for the rest of my life. It's still a part of me and really important to have that connection to my parents as well.
If you could talk to the younger and lower, ranked version of yourself, knowing that she's about to go on this journey, what advice would you give to her?
That is a fabulously difficult question to answer, because while I would like to say be your authentic self, embrace it early and as much as possible, uh, it was prohibited by policy, and I would have lost my career had I come out. Could I have embraced some things a little easier? Yes, absolutely. But if I had to actually think about it and what I learned as I transitioned, what that I could have done potentially differently was think about how I was presenting myself to the world. Because one of the most interesting things I learned when I transitioned was that I apparently had been not only putting up the shield of protecting my identity, but I had been projecting this Captain America type image, like I'm invulnerable. And that vulnerability that I displayed by transition, by showing some of my humanity, was really a way to let others in, to build connection with other people. And as a leader, if your people see you as invulnerable or always right, they're not going to bring you the issues that you need to know about to help them get through that. So I would look back to my younger self and say, be more vulnerable in whatever way you can be, because vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is not the break in your armor that lets the enemy's weapons in. It's that lets the people around you in and allows you to connect.
Mm. No, that's good. That's good. You know what? As you say that, it kind of like leads into the question I wanted to ask you, because um, when we talk about what we're really talking about is inclusion. We're really talking about inclusion and its importance and its impact on the force as a whole. Over the past couple of years, and me and Kai have had this conversation with many people. We recognize that diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility is important. It is necessary, not just for all the branches, but as a society, it's important. But obviously, you have people on the other side of that spectrum that feel like it's a distraction from mission. It's not necessary. Why are we having these extra trainings? Things like that. Can you speak to not just the importance of having more inclusive leadership, not just from the transgender community, but for every community that's currently serving in our military?
Absolutely. Inclusion is mission. Inclusion is a national security imperative, something that we have to embrace for multiple reasons. One, we are a force that relies upon the ideas and the skills of our people. And if someone does not feel that they are included, they're not going to offer their ideas. They're not going to offer their skills to the maximum extent that they can. If you feel like an outsider, why would you in that case? If you feel like you're not part of the team, or that someone is going to jump down your throat the moment you offer an opinion, why ever would you? So, inclusion is part of creating that psychologically safe environment where people are allowed and expected and feel good about sharing themselves with the team, is something we all have to do as leaders. We have to create that environment where people feel like it's okay to be themselves and to make sure they are part of the team. I got a chance to talk a couple years ago at Pentagon Pride, and talked about this very message that our senior leaders and so many people often talk about getting to dignity and respect like they are these aspirational goals. Someday we can give everyone dignity and respect that serves. I'm like, that is absolutely the wrong way of looking at it. Dignity and respect is the floor of where we need to be. And it's inclusion that takes us above that floor. And so not only is inclusion critical to mission and getting the best ideas out of our people in terms of how to accomplish our mission, but it is also a retention tool, and it is free. It requires work on our parts, but it requires no money. While the diversity around us is, kind of set for most of us. Most of us don't have the opportunity to make hiring decisions, to pick who gets recruited. So the diversity we work with on our teams is just what it is. But inclusion is something we can all drive. So in a pithy way, diversity is a fact, inclusion is an act. And it is one that gets the best out of people and it gets them to stick around. So, yeah, if you want to talk about inclusion as something I am absolutely passionate about, you found the right topic because we could go on for days on this one.
Awesome. No, absolutely. Spot on. Kai, do you have anything, boss?
I'm going to write that down. The fact
quotable.
and act, that's thinking. That's a quotable. But I have to ask, beginning and endings always have meaning, and there's that transition point. But you're a guardian now. So not only are you a trailblazer in the social sphere, you're at the forefront of a brand new branch of the military. What has that experience been like for you?
I am so excited to be part of the Space Force because how many of us ever get the opportunity to be there at the creation of a new military service? This is a once in a multiple generation type event. And so when the Space Force finally said, "Would you like to join?" and I got that email, it felt like a marriage proposal. And I was like, yes, 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 1,000 times yes. Of course I will. Not only because I'm passionate about space and what that means for our future as a species and in the defense of our nation, but also because we get to create a 21st century military and a 21st century military culture that bakes in these things that we just talked about, that has a leadership guidebook that talks about inclusion and authenticity and vulnerability as useful things, not in the typical military speak of, no, don't be vulnerable, don't be authentic. We are all stamped out and we have to be in the same image. We can't be individuals. No, we recognize that we all are individuals and we all have a part to play, and we enhance and develop our individuals so that we build cohesive teams. So again, you hit on another topic. You want something I can talk about passionately forever? Wow, Space Force is amazing, and our opportunity to build it into something we can all be both incredibly proud of and supports all of our national interests. Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited for the journey and for all our future guardians who get to do it for their entire career. What a cool opportunity.
Awesome. This has been great. This has been insightful for me. I know for sure. I'm sure for Kai it has as well, and anyone else that took the time to just listen, sit back, kick back, and open up their mind and their heart. One, thank you again for just taking the time to sit down and talk to us. And for anyone else listening, listen. If there's one thing I've taken, hey, open up your mind. Inclusion matters, and it is a mission imperative. And the Space Force is kind of dope. The Space Force is kind of dope. Those are the three things that I've taken all from this.
Nailed it.
Got it. So thank you again. Once again, thank you so much. And we will make sure that a link to the book is in the video description. Just if you're interested in that book, guys, make sure you go to the link in the description of this video. Thank you so much.
It was absolutely a pleasure to join you.